two, three.
Hello and welcome back to Mixing Music. I am your host, Dee Kei, and with me today, I have a very good friend, special guest, mix engineer, Jesse Ray Ernster. Did I say that right?
Yes, sir.
Cool, Jesse. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Everything's all right on your end. So today, we have a special song from a special artist. This artist is called Burna Boy, from Nigeria. Can you tell us a little bit about Burna Boy?
Burna Boy is an African superstar, soon to be international superstar, Afro-fusion artist, prolific songwriter, artist, dancing machine extraordinaire. Wonderful guy, writes amazing songs. We love him. Check him out. It's Burna Boy.
So this is just one guy. So he doesn't have a band. This is just one guy.
Yeah, he tours with the band and collaborates with many producers and writers on his recordings. But yes, he is a solo artist, Burna Boy.
Nice. And you, Jesse, are the mix engineer, especially for a lot of his songs, but especially for this one, right, that we're about to listen to?
Yep. The song's called Anybody. It's off the African Giant record. And it's a fun one. It's a heater.
Cool. So we're going to listen to a couple takes from Burna Boy. So Anybody, we're going to listen to this first take, which is the intro up until the first chorus. So take a listen with us.
Woohoo!
Charge my energy, I no get time for no enemy. Torí pé pọ̀lẹ́ tó mi. Nothing wey person never see, ọmọ nothing wey person never see. Forget it, I say fashi. Money soon expected. Check out what body I jump. I take out to the person.
Wow, what a dope song. That is such a cool song.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, and you did a great job with that mix. Like, it's just very full. The mid-range sounds so lush. And it's not too much. It's not, like, heavy, you know? Like, I feel like a lot of hip-hop now is just, like, heavy. I don't know how else to... Like, the middle is empty, but this one's really full. It feels very lush, and I kind of want to know what you did.
Okay. What aspects, where should we start, really?
So let's start with the bottom. Let's start with the low end and work our way up. So he's got like a little bit of that drum there, a little bit of bass.
Yeah.
And tell me about that. Like, what were you kind of going for overall with the aspect of that? Yeah.
Totally. So we wanted this sort of mass and the size, which is what they had going on the rough mix. It really was a great rough mix. It captured the essence and the vibe of what they were trying to convey when they were making the song. So the idea there was just to extend it a little lower and tighten it up a bit as well. So what I learned like earlier that week when I was mixing this song, and I think this was this last June, I heard an Eric Valentine interview where he takes the Pultecs and puts them on the stereo bus at 20 hertz and boosts up to like...
Wow, that's low.
Yeah, boosts like 4 up and then also attenuates 4 up. So you get this kind of like added low end that's like attenuated around where the bell happens.
Yeah.
So what that did is that gave the mix kind of this out of control, too much low end thing. So what I did after that was used like FabFilter Pro multiband or whatever that thing is. I think it was that to really compress and operate the low end to where it was pumping and pushing the speakers in tempo with the song. So it would let a little bit of initial transient through, but then it would duck it down. So it almost acted like a gate. And it was kind of a suction cup in the low end that just kept things really tight.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of boosting that stuff into that compressor. And then
that's so interesting. Yeah.
After all of that, running it through the SSL, hardware compressor, whatever that thing is, that's sitting back there on the desk. Yeah, because that does wonders for the low end as well. Love it.
That is awesome. So actually, let's talk a little bit more about that rough mix. What did you hear in that rough mix? I mean, we don't have, unfortunately, to our audience, we actually don't have access to the rough mix. This is a label release, so we're limited with what we're allowed to put out at this moment. But tell me a little bit more what you heard about that rough and how you kind of interpreted it.
The rough was exciting. It was punchy in all the right areas, and the vocal actually sounded fantastic. I believe my main EQ I used on the vocal was just a small, a couple of cuts, like around 1.6K, 1.6, and around 3K. I usually do a little bit of cleaning up there just because of the character of a few things within Burna's vocal sound. But as far as I know, this was recorded by a good friend of mine, a fantastic producer engineer named Logic's Mind. His name is Cecil, and he did an amazing job tracking this and engineering it. So it went in right. He was tracking on an Elam 251, just my favorite vocal mic in the world, through a Neve and then through a CL1B. So like this vocal came prepared. It was ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the only thing I did after that was I added an Avalon 80-2055 boosting 25K just at the very top end.
Yeah.
Because the 251 tends to do a little bit of a roll off. Older, it's an older mic design and older schematic. So that just brings back some of that modern sizzly, crispy top end that I love.
Yeah, I've actually talked in a previous episode about how I also usually love adding, depending on the vocal, adding that above 20K kind of vibe. That's just the sizzle,
Yeah.
That's just the sauce
and you get
right
the undertones underneath it, and you get that perceived openness. It's gorgeous. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's used very well in this tune. So let's listen to another clip of the same song from Burna Boy.
Respect is reciprocal, even though una know say I special. Anybody, when no one to surgery. Anybody, when no the carry body. I can't something, I can't something. To bata fele, I can't something. You want job but you never work, should not because myself I never talk. I look you, they laugh, you go. I shall no say the time will come.
All right. That is, again, I'm just so blown away. This is such an awesome song. Production is so well done. Everything is just so clean and come together. I want to ask you what you did with that horn. That little, is that a saxophone in the background?
Yeah.
Tell me about that saxophone and what you did to that.
It's funny that you ask because that was the one mix note I received for this song when I submitted it. And it was that we needed the horn to have more punch. And they literally wanted it to just warp out of the speakers and hit you in the face.
Really? Because every time I hear horns, especially, this is a solo horn, but when I hear group horns specifically, I always come back to Earth, Wind, and Fire, where they're really bright, but they're very quiet. So they still come out, but this is very smooth, but it's still coming out. So I want to ask you what the rough mix was, or your first initial mix, and then how you translated when the client asks, we want it to come out of the speaker, we want it to punch, how you translated that, what that meant to you and how you treated it after that. So what was it like before?
That's a great question. So on the rough before, it felt overall just too loud. They knew ahead of time that was what they were going for. Loud horns, energy, let's get it. And the way that I went about it was a trick that my dad taught me, and it was to, in layman's terms, poke the element out for a millisecond to tell the listener's mind psychologically that they're hearing the element and that it's present, and then bring it right back down to where it's tucked in and it's controlled. So with that, I did a little bit of boosting with the SSL E-Series EQ, around 2 to 5K, bringing some of that bite out into a transient designer, boosting the attack.
Really? On the horn, on the saxophone?
Absolutely. To give it that just initial, so you get that transient to really punch.
Nice.
But the key is that you get too much of that. So what that thing fed into was the Crane Song Phoenix plugin, which is a tape saturation and clipping plugin. And that helped shave off the pokiness of what those transient designers tend to do a little bit too much of. So that rounded things out. And then there was also some volume automation, poking it like I said, for a millisecond to 5 milliseconds and then bringing it back down. The listener thinks that it's there. They feel like it's there, but it's also...
Yeah.
And then there's the same way to do it with the quarter note delay that's feeding a reverb in the background. You kind of bring that space up to make up for it. So as the sound of the sax is fading away, you can bring the rooms up at the exact same time, and you end up with this crossfade that helps it not be an awkward transition. And the listener doesn't know that any of that happened behind the scenes, but it did, and it helps for the effect. And they
so
loved
one more
it.
time, yeah. So one more time, I just want to cover it again. So you boosted, mid-range, 2.5-ish, little transient designer, and then saturation, and then you did a lot of automation, right?
Always automation.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, I've talked about automation in the past, but I want to ask you how much automation you used on this song and how much automation you see professionals like yourself using in general on every song.
Yeah, I did a fair amount of automation on this song because you just need to. As you can hear, it starts out very bare bones. The arrangement is just a beat and the sax, and things really build from there. And you have to move levels around to not only accommodate for masking and things getting muddy, and you're going to need to be moving things around, but also it just adds excitement. So a lot of that beat, especially in the intro, is not just drums, the fader sitting at 0, sitting still, static. That's pushing the faders. Like opening up that session, I always love to move kicks and snares in time, dialing in both the compression in time with your attack and release to get those speaker cones pushing air in tempo with the song, but also moving the fade, just giving it a little bit. I learned that from a talented front of house engineer I used to work with. I would look back there. I was on stage playing guitar at the time, and I would see him just moving, like performing the faders to the beat of these songs with his kick and snare and the shells for the toms. I thought,
really? So even though the kick and snare is only doing the beats and not really sustaining, but he's basically adding a little bit more punch and taking away the sustain? Is that what he's doing, or you were doing in this case?
Yes, absolutely. And then there's times...
So kind of like manual transient designer kind of a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and really on other songs, you can really... If you have a guy that's maybe playing a little too hard for the slow tempo ballad, you can shave that initial transient and dampen it by pulling the fader back and then right back up. You can turn a thwacky, inappropriate snare for a song and turn it into whew, and make the envelope of that sound match the tonality and the feeling of the song that you're working on. And a lot of the time, the client or the artist maybe won't know that you did that, but it will feel better to them. Or it won't. They'll really want it to be like the rough, which is the case a lot of the time. Make it like the rough.
Yeah,
I'm sure you hear that
absolutely.
a lot too, man.
Yeah, it's all about the rough, all about respecting that rough mix.
Yeah.
So we don't usually do this, but as for our special guest and for special promotion for Burna Boy and his upcoming album, African Giant, we're going to play this entire song front to back for you. So please take a listen.
Charge my energy, I no get time for no enemy. Torí pé wọlé tó mi. Nothing wey person never see, I'm on nothing wey person never see. Forget it, I say fashi. Money soon expected. Take our body, I jump. I take her to the person. Jejeli, jeje. I'm in the answer, then yes sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes sir. Respect is reciprocal, even though una know say I special. Anybody, we no want to surgery. Anybody, we no the carry body. I can't something, I can't something. To bata fele, I can't something. You want job where you never work, should not because myself I never talk. I look you, they laugh, you go. I shall no say the time go come, mama, I no say the time go come. When you no go fit the line, no more. Mama, life not on python, whether you like or not. surgery. Anybody, we know the carry body. I can't something, I can't something. To bata fele fele, I can't something. Money soon expected. Take our body, I jump. I take her to the best. Jelly, je. I'm in the answer, then yes, sir. Then I'm in the answer, yes, sir. Respect is reciprocal, even though una know say I special. Anybody, we no want to surgery. Anybody, we no the carry body. Nah, can't something, nah, can't something. To bata fele fele, nah, can't something. To bata fele fele, 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 to bata
Thank you so much, Jesse, for joining us on this podcast. Where can our listeners find you? Are you on Instagram? Do you have a website? Like, how can they get in contact with you if they want?
Yep, my handle is Jesse Ray Mix on Instagram, and then website is www.jesserayMix.com.
If you like what you heard during this episode, please make sure to check out Burna Boy and his new album, African Giant. Please remember to give this episode and this podcast a 5-star rating or review. Feel free to share with any friends or any mix engineers that you might know. And stay saucy.
Sweet.
1, 2, 3.
This episode of Mixing Music with Dee Kei has been brought to you by LaunchPod Media. If you want to start a podcast, make sure to start it right with LaunchPod Media.